The security camera captured it all, Karen's entitled smirk as she crashed my backyard party, her shocked scream as she tumbled into the deep end, and the moment everything changed. What started as trespassing became a lawsuit that would expose secrets neither of us saw coming. She thought she'd won when that process server knocked on my door. She had no idea I'd been recording everything, and that her own lawyer was about to become my greatest ally. The bass from Marcus's sound system rattled the windows of his modest two-story home as the Saturday evening barbecue hit its stride. The backyard was alive with the warm glow of string lights and the satisfied chatter of 20-something friends celebrating another successful week. Marcus Chen adjusted the dimmer on the pool lights, watching the blue water shimmer like liquid sapphire beneath the stars. "Yo, Marcus," his college buddy Jake called out, balancing a plate piled high with ribs. "This setup is insane, man. When did you become the neighborhood party king?" Marcus grinned, cracking open a beer. "What can I say? Working 60-hour weeks at the law firm pays for some decent toys." He gestured toward the pristine pool area, complete with a hot tub, outdoor kitchen, and carefully manicured landscaping. "Besides, after this week's caseload, I needed something to help me decompress." Speaking of decompressing, his girlfriend, Sophia said, sliding up beside him with a knowing look, "Didn't you say your neighbor's been giving you grief about the noise?" "Karen Fletcher." Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "Lives next door in the yellow house. She's called the cops 3 times this month, filed complaints with the HOA, and even tried to get the city to cite me for disturbing the peace. The irony is, I've checked the noise ordinances, we're well within legal limits until 11 p.m. "What's her deal?" Jake asked, taking a long swig of his beer. "Divorced, empty nester, and apparently has nothing better to do than police the neighborhood," Sophia replied. She actually came over last week demanding Marcus tone down the fun because it was making her feel excluded and targeted. Marcus shook his head. "I invited her to join us once. She looked at me like I'd suggested she eat glass." The conversation was interrupted by a sharp banging on the front gate. The party continued, but Marcus felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. He made his way through the crowd, past the couple swaying to the music near the pool's edge, and toward the side yard where his 6-foot privacy fence bordered Karen's property. "Marcus Chen." The voice was shrill, cutting through the evening air like nails on a chalkboard. "I know you can hear me." Marcus exchanged glances with Jake, who had followed him. "Here we go," he muttered. "Turn down that music right now. It's 8:30 on a Saturday night and some of us have responsibilities." "It's 8:30 on a Saturday," Jake whispered incredulously. "What responsibilities?" Marcus approached the fence line, keeping his voice level and professional. Years of dealing with difficult clients had taught him the value of staying calm. "Hi, Karen. We are keeping the music at a reasonable level and we'll be wrapping up by 10:30. "Reasonable?" Her voice climbed another octave. "I can't even hear my own television. This is harassment. I'm calling the police again." "That's your right," Marcus replied evenly. "When they get here, they'll tell you the same thing they told you last week. We're not violating any noise ordinances." There was a moment of silence, then the unmistakable sound of Karen's sliding door slamming shut. Marcus shrugged and headed back toward the party, but Jake grabbed his arm. "Dude, look." Marcus turned to see a ladder being positioned against the fence line. Within seconds, Karen's perfectly coiffed blonde head appeared above the wooden slats, her face twisted with indignation. "I'm documenting this harassment," she announced, holding up her phone. "Every person, every car, every violation." The party guests had begun to notice the commotion. Several people pointed and laughed, which only seemed to fuel Karen's determination. She adjusted her position on the ladder, leaning farther over the fence to get better angles. Marcus called out, his legal training kicking in. "You're on my property line. I'm going to have to ask you to. I'm documenting evidence." Karen shrieked, waving her phone frantically. "This is a public nuisance and I'm gathering proof." What happened next occurred in slow motion, like a scene from a disaster movie. Karen, in her zealousness to capture the perfect incriminating video, leaned too far forward. The ladder, positioned hastily and without proper securing, began to wobble. her eyes went wide with the sudden realization that gravity was about to become her enemy. "Oh, shit," Jake breathed. Karen windmilled her arms, the phone flying from her grasp and clattering onto Marcus's deck. For a moment, she teetered on the edge of the fence, her face cycling through emotions, surprise, fear, then pure rage, as if this too was somehow Marcus's fault. The fence wasn't designed to support an adult woman's full weight. The top rail cracked with a sharp snap that silenced the entire party. Karen tumbled forward, her designer blouse catching on the broken wood, and plummeted toward the deep end of the pool with a splash that sent water cascading across the deck. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The music continued playing, creating a surreal soundtrack to the chaos. Then the backyard erupted. "Holy shit. Did you see that? Someone get her out." Marcus was already moving, diving into the pool without hesitation. Whatever the differences, he wasn't about to let his neighbor drown in his backyard. He reached Karen just as she surfaced, sputtering and flailing. "I've got you," he said, wrapping an arm around her torso. "Stop fighting me." But Karen was beyond reason. As Marcus tried to guide her toward the shallow end, she twisted in his grip, her manicured nails raking across his forearm. "Get away from me," she screamed, even as he pulled her to safety. "This is your fault. Your fault." Jake and 2 other guests helped haul Karen from the pool, her clothes clinging to her frame, her makeup streaked down her cheeks like war paint. She stood dripping on the deck, shivering from cold and rage, pointing an accusatory finger at Marcus. "You're going to pay for this," she spat, water dripping from her hair. "You're going to pay for everything." "Karen, you were trespassing on my property," Marcus said carefully, very aware that every guest was now recording with their phones. "I think we should call the paramedics to make sure you're okay, and then, don't you dare tell me what to do." She was practically vibrating with fury. "I was documenting your illegal activities when your defective fence collapsed. This is negligence. This is assault." Sophia appeared with a towel, which Karen slapped away. "I don't want your help. Any of you." Karen's voice had taken on a hysterical edge. "You think you can just move into this neighborhood and terrorize decent people? You think your money and your fancy pool give you the right to make everyone else's life miserable?" Marcus felt his own temper beginning to fray. "I've tried to be reasonable with you, Karen. I've followed every noise ordinance, invited you to our gatherings, and tried to be a good neighbor. You're the one who climbed onto my property, liar," she shrieked. "I was on the property line. It's my right to document harassment when I see it. From a ladder. Leaning 8 feet over my fence." The crowd murmured agreement, but Karen was beyond caring about public opinion. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer," she said with as much dignity as a soaking wet woman could muster. "I'm suing you for everything you've got. Your negligent fence, your harassment, your whole existence in this neighborhood." She stomped toward the side gate, leaving a trail of pool water behind her. At the gate, she turned back one final time. "I hope you enjoyed your little party, Marcus. Because it's going to cost you your house." The gate slammed shut with enough force to rattle the hinges. The party crowd stood in stunned silence for a moment before Jake started laughing. Did that really just happen? But Marcus wasn't laughing. He was staring at the broken fence rail, calculating liability and exposure, his legal mind already racing through the potential complications. Karen Fletcher had just declared war, and she'd chosen to fight it in the one arena where Marcus actually held the advantage. What she didn't know was that Marcus had recently installed a comprehensive security system, cameras that captured not just the backyard, but the entire perimeter of his property. Cameras that had recorded everything, including Karen's precarious positioning on the ladder and her deliberate lean over his fence line. "Sophia," he said quietly, "call the police. I want this incident documented properly." "You think she'll really sue?" Marcus looked at the spot where Karen had been standing, then at the water slowly spreading across his deck. In his 3 years as a civil litigation attorney, he'd seen people sue for far less. "Oh, she'll sue," he said grimly. "But she has no idea what she's walking into." As his guests slowly resumed their conversations and the party attempted to regain Its momentum, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the security app. The footage was crystal clear, Karen positioning the ladder, climbing up, leaning over, and falling entirely due to her own actions on his property, but as he watched the video, something else caught his attention. In the timestamp corner, he could see Karen's own phone had been recording when she fell. That phone was now sitting on his deck, probably still unlocked. Marcus smiled for the first time since the incident. Karen Fletcher wanted tea. The process server arrived on a Tuesday morning that felt deceptively peaceful. Marcus was reviewing depositions at his kitchen table, steam rising from his coffee mug, when the doorbell chimed with an almost ominous tone. Through the window, he could see a stocky man in a rumpled suit holding an official-looking envelope. Marcus Chen, the man asked when Marcus opened the door. That's me. You've been served. The envelope changed hands with practiced efficiency. Have a good day. Marcus closed the door and stared at the legal document that would change everything. The return address made his eyebrows rise. Whitmore, Kessler and Associates, one of the most aggressive personal injury firms in the city. Karen hadn't just hired any lawyer, she'd hired sharks. The complaint was a masterpiece of legal fiction. 23 pages of allegations that painted Marcus as a negligent neighbor who had created a dangerous and defective property condition that had caused Karen Fletcher to suffer severe physical injuries, emotional trauma, and ongoing psychological distress. She was seeking $250,000 in damages. Attractive nuisance, premises liability, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Marcus muttered, reading through the charges. Jesus, Karen. You really went nuclear. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. How bad is it? Marcus photographed the first page and sent it back. His phone rang immediately. $250,000. Sophia's voice was pitched high with disbelief. For falling off a ladder into a pool. It gets better, Marcus said, flipping pages. She's claiming the fence was improperly maintained and structurally unsound, that I deliberately and maliciously created conditions designed to harm neighboring property owners, and that my pattern of harassment and intimidation directly led to her injuries. That's insane. She was trespassing. According to this, she was exercising her legal right to document ongoing harassment from an adjacent property line. Marcus couldn't help but admire the legal craftsmanship, even as it targeted him. Her lawyer is good. Really good. 20 minutes later, Marcus was sitting across from his boss, senior partner Elizabeth Hartwell, in her corner office overlooking the city. Hartwell was 55, silver-haired, and had built her reputation by never losing cases that mattered. She read through Karen's complaint with the detached precision of a surgeon examining an X-ray. Well, she said finally, this is either going to be very expensive or very educational. I'm hoping for educational. Hartwell leaned back in her leather chair. Marcus, I'm going to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Is there any universe in which this woman has a legitimate case? Marcus had been preparing for this question since the moment he'd opened the envelope. None. I have security footage of the entire incident. She climbed onto a ladder, positioned it against my fence, leaned over onto my property, and fell when the fence rail couldn't support her weight. She was trespassing, and her injuries were entirely due to her own negligence. You certain about the footage? Crystal clear, time-stamped, from multiple angles. Marcus paused. There's something else. When she fell, her phone landed on my deck. She was recording the whole thing. Hartwell's eyebrows rose. Please tell me you secured that phone. I turned it over to the police when they arrived. But not before I noticed she had been live streaming to her Facebook page. Live streaming her own trespassing. Every detail, including her commentary about how she was going to gather evidence to make that arrogant lawyer pay. Hartwell was quiet for a long moment, then she smiled, a predatory expression that Marcus had seen her deploy against opposing counsel. In settlement negotiations. Marcus, I'm going to make you an offer. You can settle this quietly, pay her legal fees and maybe $20,000 to make it go away. Or, she leaned forward. You can let me handle this case personally, and we can turn Ms. Fletcher's lawsuit into a teaching moment about the dangers of frivolous litigation. The choice was obvious. I want the teaching moment. Excellent. Hartwell pressed her intercom button. Sarah, clear my calendar for Thursday. I need to make some calls. The first shot across the bow came that afternoon. Marcus was reviewing contracts when his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mr. Chen. This is David Whitmore from Whitmore, Kessler and Associates. I represent Ms. Karen Fletcher in regard to the incident at your property. Marcus recognized the name. Whitmore was the senior partner, known for his aggressive tactics and impressive settlement record. Mr. Whitmore. I've received your complaint. Good. Now, Mr. Chen, I'm calling because I believe we can resolve this matter quickly and amicably. My client has suffered significant injuries, but she's a reasonable woman. If you're willing to discuss compensation for her medical expenses and pain and suffering, I think we can avoid a lengthy court battle. Marcus almost laughed. The man's tone was perfectly calibrated, friendly but with an undertone of threat. What did you have in mind? Well, considering the severity of the structural defect that caused Ms. Fletcher's fall and the ongoing medical treatment she'll require, I think $75,000 would be a fair starting point for settlement discussions. $75,000. Marcus kept his voice neutral. That's significantly less than what she's asking for in the complaint. Between you and me, Mr. Chen, juries can be unpredictable. Medical bills add up quickly, and pain and suffering awards they can be substantial. I'd hate to see a young professional like yourself face a judgment that could impact your career. The threat was delivered with practiced smoothness, but Marcus heard it clearly. Pay up, or face financial ruin. I appreciate the call, Mr. Whitmore. I'll need to discuss this with my attorney and get back to you. Of course. But I wouldn't wait too long. My client is quite distressed and her medical condition seems to be deteriorating. The longer this drags on, the more expensive it becomes for everyone. After hanging up, Marcus immediately called Hartwell. 75,000, she repeated. He started at 75. Is that significant? It means he knows his case is weak. If he thought he could win, he'd never settle for less than 200. He's fishing, hoping you'll panic and pay to make it go away. So what's our next move? We investigate. I want to know everything about Karen Fletcher, her employment history, her financial situation, her medical records, her social media presence. Everything. Is that legal? Hartwell chuckled. Marcus, she sued you for $250,000 and accused you of deliberately trying to harm her. In civil litigation, her entire life becomes an open book. If she wants to claim emotional distress and ongoing trauma, she'd better be prepared to prove it. The investigation began immediately. Hartwell had connections throughout the city, private investigators, information brokers, and former law enforcement officers who specialized in civil case research. Within 48 hours, Marcus had a file on Karen Fletcher that was more comprehensive than most background checks. The picture that emerged was fascinating and troubling. Karen Fletcher, age 47, had been divorced for 3 years following a highly contentious legal battle with her ex-husband, Dr. Richard Fletcher, a prominent cardiologist. The divorce had been ugly, accusations of infidelity, hidden assets, and emotional abuse on both sides. Karen had received a substantial settlement, including the house next to Marcus, but she'd blown through most of the money in less than 2 years. More importantly, Karen had a history of litigation. In the past 5 years, she'd filed claims against a grocery store, slip and fall, a restaurant, food poisoning, her former employer, workplace harassment, and her ex-husband's medical practice, emotional distress. None of the cases had gone to trial, all had resulted in small settlements. She's a professional victim, Hartwell observed, reviewing the file. This isn't her first rodeo. But the most damaging information came from Karen's own social media accounts. Her Facebook page was a treasure trove of evidence that directly contradicted her claims of injury and trauma. Photos from the week after the incident showed her at a wine tasting, at a fitness class, and hiking with friends. Her posts were filled with complaints about Marcus, but also detailed descriptions of her strategy for dealing with problem neighbors. The smoking gun came from her live stream the night of the incident. The video had been automatically saved to her Facebook account, and it captured everything: her decision to climb the ladder, her commentary about getting evidence, and her admission that she was going to make him pay for ruining the neighborhood. "This is better than I hoped," Hartwell said, watching the video for the third time. She documented her own criminal trespassing and then tried to monetize the consequences. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction watching Karen condemn herself with her own words. But the best was yet to come. "There's one more thing," Hartwell said, pulling out another document. "I had our investigator check Karen's medical records from the emergency room visit after the incident." "Is that legal?" "Her medical condition is central to her lawsuit. She opened that door when she filed." Hartwell's smile was sharp. According to the ER report, Karen refused most of the recommended tests, declined pain medication, and was discharged with minor bruising and a recommendation for rest. The attending physician noted that she seemed more interested in documenting her visit than receiving tray. The deposition was scheduled for a crisp Thursday morning in October, 6 weeks after Karen Fletcher had declared legal war on Marcus Chen. The conference room at Whitmore, Kessler and Associates buzzed with the familiar tension of pre-battle preparation. Karen sat at the polished mahogany table, her lawyer David Whitmore beside her, both wearing expressions of confident determination. Across from them, Marcus sat with Elizabeth Hartwell, who had spent the previous evening preparing what she privately called the surgical strikes, a series of questions designed to dismantle Karen's case piece by methodical piece. "Before we begin," Whitmore announced, adjusting his expensive tie, "I want to state for the record that my client has suffered significant ongoing trauma from this incident. We'll be limiting questions about her emotional state to protect her well-being." Hartwell didn't look up from her notes. "Mr. Whitmore, your client is claiming emotional distress damages. Her emotional state is the cornerstone of her case. She doesn't get to shield the very evidence she's using to sue my client." Karen leaned forward, her voice sharp. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked by Mrs. Fletcher," the court reporter interrupted gently. "I need to swear you in first." After the oath was administered, Hartwell began with seemingly innocent questions about Karen's background, employment, and living situation. Marcus watched Karen's confidence build with each easy answer. She was clearly enjoying the opportunity to present herself as a victim. "Now, Mrs. Fletcher," Hartwell said, her tone remaining conversational, "let's talk about the evening of the incident. Can you describe what led you to climb onto the ladder?" "I was documenting the ongoing harassment from Mr. Chen's property," Karen replied, her voice taking on the practiced cadence of someone who had rehearsed this story. "The music was extremely loud, there were people everywhere, and I felt it was necessary to gather evidence of the disturbance." "And where exactly were you positioned when you fell?" "I was on my own property, on the property line, when Mr. Chen's defective fence collapsed." Hartwell nodded sympathetically. "That must have been terrifying. Now, when you say you were documenting the harassment, were you taking photographs?" "Yes, and video." "With your phone?" "Of course." "And what happened to your phone during the fall?" Karen hesitated for the first time. "It fell onto his deck." "Did you retrieve it that evening?" "No, the police took it as evidence." Hartwell made a note. "Mrs. Fletcher, were you live streaming during this documentation?" Whitmore's pen stopped moving. He looked up sharply, but Karen was already answering. "I may have been. I often live stream to keep my friends informed about neighborhood issues." "So there would be a video record of the entire incident from your perspective?" "I suppose so, yes." Marcus watched Whitmore's face as the realization hit him. The lawyer's confident expression was cracking around the edges. "Mrs. Fletcher," Hartwell continued, "in this live stream, did you make any statements about your intentions regarding Mr. Chen?" "I don't recall specifically." Hartwell reached into a briefcase and withdrew a tablet. "Let me refresh your memory. This is a transcript of your Facebook live stream from the evening in question." She began reading. "I'm going to get evidence of what this arrogant lawyer is doing to our neighborhood. He thinks he's so smart, but I'm going to make him pay for ruining everything." The color drained from Karen's face. That was taken out of context. What context would make threatening to make him pay less threatening? Objection, Whitmore interjected. Argumentative. This is a deposition, not a trial, Hartwell replied smoothly. Mrs. Fletcher, continuing with your live stream, you also said, and I quote, I'm going to lean over and get perfect shots of all these people so we can identify every single one of them. Is that accurate? Oh. I was upset. So you deliberately planned to lean over Mr. Chen's fence before you fell? Karen's lawyer was frantically taking notes now, clearly realizing his case was imploding in real time. Mrs. Fletcher, let's talk about your injuries. You claim in your complaint that you suffered severe physical trauma requiring ongoing medical treatment. Can you describe these injuries? I had bruising, soreness, emotional trauma. What specific medical treatment have you received since the incident? I went to the emergency room that night. And after that? Karen shifted uncomfortably. I've been managing the pain myself. No physical therapy. No follow-up doctor visits. No prescription medications. I don't like taking pills. Hartwell consulted her notes. According to the emergency room report, you declined the recommended CT scan and refused pain medication. The attending physician noted that your injuries were minor and you were primarily concerned with documenting your visit for legal purposes. Is that accurate? Whitmore stood up. I'm going to need a moment to confer with my client. Of course. Hartwell's smile was serene. During the break, Marcus could hear heated whispers from the hallway where Karen and her lawyer had retreated. When they returned, Karen's face was flushed and Whitmore looked like a man who had just discovered his parachute had a hole in it. Mrs. Fletcher, Hartwell resumed, let's discuss your social media activity since the incident. You claim to be suffering from severe emotional distress and ongoing trauma. Is that correct? Yes. Yet 3 days after the incident, you posted photos from a wine tasting event. How does that square with your claims of trauma? I was trying to maintain normalcy. And the hiking photos from the following weekend. My therapist said I should stay active. What therapist? Karen's mouth opened and closed silently. Mrs. Fletcher, have you actually seen a therapist since this incident? Oh. I've been meaning to. So when you just claimed your therapist recommended staying active, that was false. I misspoke. Hartwell turned to a new page in her notes. Let's talk about your history of legal claims. In 2019, you sued Whole Foods for a slip and fall incident. In 2020, you filed a claim against Romano's restaurant for alleged food poisoning. In 2021, you sued your former employer for workplace harassment. In 2022, you filed an emotional distress claim against your ex-husband's medical practice. Is this accurate? Whitmore was on his feet again. Relevance. It speaks to Mrs. Fletcher's pattern of monoizing unfortunate events, Hartwell replied calmly. Mrs. Fletcher, she continued, what were the outcomes of these previous lawsuits? They were settled. For how much? That's confidential. Mrs. Fletcher, were any of these cases actually tried in court, or did they all result in nuisance settlements? Karen's silence was answer enough. Let's move on to the evening of the incident. Mrs. Fletcher, how much had you been drinking that night? I hadn't been drinking. Really? Because in your live stream, you can be heard saying, I may have had a couple glasses of wine with dinner, but I know what I'm doing. The trap had been sprung perfectly. Marcus watched Karen realize that every lie she told could be contradicted by her own recorded words. Mrs. Fletcher, in your complaint, you claim that Mr. Chen created a dangerous condition with his fence. Are you aware that the fence was inspected by the city just 6 months ago and passed all safety requirements? I wouldn't know about that. Are you also aware that your own homeowner's insurance has a record of you climbing that same fence 2 years ago to retrieve a frisbee that had gone into Mr. Chen's yard? Whitmore's head snapped up. How could you possibly know that? Discovery, Mr. Whitmore. Your client opened the door to her entire relationship with my client's property when she filed this lawsuit. Karen was shrinking in her chair, the confident victim persona completely dissolved. Mrs. Fletcher, one final question. In your live stream from the night of the incident, you made a statement just before you fell. You said, even if I get hurt. Doing this, it'll be worth it to nail this guy. Do you remember saying that? The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Finally, Karen whispered, I want to stop this deposition. Mrs. Fletcher, we're not finished, I said I want to stop. Karen exploded, slamming her hand on the table. This is harassment. This is exactly what I was talking about. You people think you can just destroy anyone who stands up to you. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her water glass. David, I'm leaving. Fix this. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. Whitmore sat in the sudden silence, staring at the puddle of water spreading across his conference table. Finally, he looked up at Hartwell. I assume you'll be filing a motion for sanctions. Among other things, Hartwell replied, methodically packing her files. Perjury, frivolous litigation, abuse of process. My client has also asked me to pursue a malicious prosecution claim. Elizabeth, can we talk? Off the record. Hartwell paused. What did you have in mind? My client may have been overzealous in her recollection of events. Perhaps we could discuss a mutual dismissal, Mr. Whitmore. Hartwell interrupted. Your client committed perjury in a recorded deposition, filed a frivolous lawsuit based on documented lies, and has been harassing my client for months. We are past the point of mutual dismissal. Marcus watched Whitmore's face as the full scope of his position became clear. The man had built his career on intimidating defendants into settlement, but now he was facing a case where every piece of evidence worked against him. What are you looking for? Whitmore asked quietly. A full dismissal with prejudice, payment of my client's attorney fees, eh? The phone rang at 6:47 a.m., jarring Marcus from sleep. Elizabeth Hartwell's voice was crisp despite the early hour, carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who had been awake for hours preparing for battle. Marcus, we have a problem. David Whitmore just filed an emergency motion to withdraw from Karen Fletcher's case. Marcus sat up, instantly alert. He's abandoning ship. Worse. He's claiming that his client misrepresented material facts and that continuing representation would violate his professional ethics. In lawyer speak, he's saying Karen lied to him so extensively that he can't continue without risking his license. Is that good for us or bad for us? Both. Good because it confirms everything we suspected about Karen's credibility. Bad because now she's going to represent herself, and self-represented litigants are unpredictable. They don't follow rules, they don't understand procedure, and they can turn a straightforward case into a circus. Marcus was already pulling on clothes. What's our next move? Emergency hearing at 9 a.m. Judge Morrison's courtroom. And Marcus? Bring everything. Karen Fletcher is about to become very dangerous. The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had expected, with wood-paneled walls that seemed to absorb sound and create an atmosphere of solemn authority. Judge Patricia Morrison presided from the bench with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had seen every type of legal drama imaginable and had little patience for theatrics. David Whitmore sat at the plaintiff's table alone, looking like a man who had discovered his winning lottery ticket was counterfeit. Karen Fletcher was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Whitmore, Judge Morrison began, your motion to withdraw is highly unusual, especially this late in the proceedings. You'll need to provide compelling justification. Whitmore stood, his usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort. Your Honor, during yesterday's deposition, it became clear that my client had not been forthcoming about material facts in this case. Specifically, she provided testimony that directly contradicted physical evidence and her own recorded statements. You alleging that your client committed perjury? Your Honor, I'm alleging that my client's version of events is irreconcilable with the documentary evidence, and continuing to represent her would place me in an ethically untenable position. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change, but Marcus could sense her irritation. Ms. Hartwell, what's the defendant's position on this motion? Hartwell rose gracefully. Your Honor, while we understand Mr. Whitmore's ethical concerns, his client's dishonesty doesn't absolve her of responsibility for filing a frivolous lawsuit. We request that the court deny the motion to withdraw unless Mrs. Fletcher agrees. to dismiss her claims with prejudice and pay defendant's attorney fees. Where is Mrs. Fletcher? As if summoned by the question, the courtroom doors burst open. Karen Fletcher strode in wearing a black suit that was clearly meant to convey legal authority but somehow made her look like she was playing dress-up. Her arms were loaded with file boxes and manila folders, and her face carried the determined expression of someone who had spent the night convincing herself she was about to triumph against impossible odds. Your Honor, she announced before reaching her table. I'm here to inform the court that I'm firing Mr. Whitmore for incompetence and malpractice. He completely failed to present my case properly. Judge Morrison's gavel came down with a sharp crack. Mrs. Fletcher, you will address this court properly or you will be held in contempt. Are you represented by counsel? I'm representing myself, Your Honor. Mr. Whitmore has proven himself completely inadequate. Whitmore looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Your Honor, this confirms my position. I move for immediate withdrawal from this case. Motion granted, Judge Morrison said without hesitation. Mr. Whitmore, you're dismissed. Mrs. Fletcher, you now have 30 seconds to organize your materials. This court will not be delayed by your lack of preparation. Karen fumbled with her boxes, papers spilling onto the floor. Your Honor, I need time to prepare. I've been betrayed by my own lawyer. Mrs. Fletcher, you filed this lawsuit. You chose to proceed pro se. The court's schedule doesn't adjust for your choices. Judge Morrison turned to Hartwell. Ms. Hartwell, I understand the defendant has filed a motion for summary judgment. That's correct, Your Honor. We believe the evidence clearly demonstrates that plaintiff's claims are without merit and that this lawsuit constitutes a frivolous action intended to harass the defendant. Karen shot to her feet. That's a lie. This man deliberately created a dangerous condition that caused me severe injuries. He's been harassing me for months. Mrs. Fletcher, Judge Morrison's voice carried a warning, you will present evidence, not accusations. Do you have evidence to support your claims? I have video evidence. Karen announced triumphantly, holding up a tablet. I recorded everything. Approach the bench, Judge Morrison ordered. Marcus watched as Karen confidently walked to the judge's bench, clearly believing her ace in the hole was about to vindicate her. Hartwell followed, carrying her own tablet. Mrs. Fletcher, show me this video evidence. Karen fumbled with the tablet for several seconds before managing to pull up her Facebook live stream. Here, Your Honor. This shows exactly what happened. Judge Morrison watched the video with an impassive expression. Marcus could see the exact moment when Karen realized her mistake. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly as Karen's own voice came through the speakers. I'm going to lean over and get perfect shots. Even if I get hurt doing this, it'll be worth it to nail this guy. Mrs. Fletcher, Judge Morrison said slowly, this video appears to show you deliberately trespassing on the defendant's property with the stated intention of gathering evidence for legal action, regardless of personal risk. That's not what I meant. To Ms. Hartwell, do you have additional evidence? Hartwell activated her tablet, showing the security camera footage from Marcus's property. The video was damning, crystal clear shots of Karen positioning the ladder, climbing up, leaning far over the fence line, and falling entirely due to her own actions. Judge Morrison studied both videos, her expression growing increasingly stern. Mrs. Fletcher, return to your table. Back at the plaintiff's table, Karen looked like she was beginning to understand the magnitude of her miscalculation. Mrs. Fletcher, Judge Morrison continued, the evidence you've presented appears to undermine your own case. The video clearly shows you trespassing on defendant's property and falling due to your own negligence. Moreover, your own statements indicate premeditation and a deliberate intent to create a situation that could result in legal action. Your Honor, I was defending myself against harassment by climbing onto the defendant's property. I was on the property line. Judge Morrison consulted her notes. Ms. Hartwell, what does the survey show? Your Honor, the survey clearly shows that Mrs. Fletcher was at least 3 feet onto my client's property when she fell. We have precise measurements. Your Honor, Karen interjected, her voice rising, this is all a setup. He planned this whole thing. He wanted me to fall so he could. Mrs. Fletcher, stop. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Are you seriously alleging that the defendant somehow psychically compelled you to climb a ladder and trespass on his property? He was playing music. Loud music. It was harassment. Was the music above legally permitted levels? Karen hesitated. Oh, it felt loud. Feeling and fact are different things, Mrs. Fletcher. Ms. Hartwell, does the defendant have evidence regarding noise levels? Yes, Your Honor. We have decibel readings from that evening showing levels well within permitted ranges. We also have police reports from Mrs. Fletcher's previous noise complaints, all of which found no violations. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair, and Marcus could see her forming her decision. Mrs. Fletcher, based on the evidence presented, your case appears to be fundamentally without merit. You have presented video evidence that shows you deliberately trespassing with intent to create grounds for legal action. The defendant's security footage corroborates this. Your own statements on the record indicate premeditation. But I was hurt. I was injured. According to the medical records, your injuries were minor bruising that required no treatment beyond an emergency room visit where you declined most recommended care. Judge Morrison shuffled through papers. Mrs. Fletcher, I'm prepared to grant the defendant's motion for summary judgment. Do you have any evidence, actual evidence, not accusations, that would support your claims? Karen's face was cycling through emotions: anger, desperation, confusion. Your Honor, this isn't fair. He's a lawyer. He has advantages I don't have. Mrs. Fletcher, the law applies equally to everyone. Being a lawyer doesn't give someone license to maintain dangerous property conditions or harass neighbors. But it also doesn't make them responsible for other people's poor decisions. Karen suddenly slammed her hand on the table. This is corruption. You're all in this together. This is exactly what I was trying to expose. The bailiff took a step forward, but Judge Morrison raised a hand. Mrs. Fletcher, you are dangerously close to contempt of court. I suggest you consider your next words very carefully. But Karen was beyond rational thought. You can't silence me. I know what this is. This is how the system protects the wealthy and powerful. Well, I'm not going away quietly.